Little girl cuts her own hair. Teacher sees the reason and calls 911 in panic. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The morning bell at Oakwood Elementary echoed through the hallways as Ms. Rowan adjusted her reading glasses and welcomed her first-grade students with a warm smile. After 38 years of teaching, Catherine Rowan could read children like open books, their joys, their troubles, their secrets. At 60, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, she was the teacher parents requested and children adored. "Good morning, everyone," she called out, her voice carrying that perfect mix of authority and warmth that only veteran teachers master. The children responded in a cheerful chorus as they hung up their backpacks and settled into their colorful chairs. That's when she noticed Eliza wasn't in her usual spot by the window. Eliza Parker was a quiet child, with observant brown eyes and a shy smile that appeared rarely, but lit up her whole face when it did. She usually arrived early, clutching her worn Hello Kitty doll and carefully arranging her pencils before class began. The classroom door creaked open, and Ms. Rowan looked up, expecting to see the familiar sight of Eliza's long chestnut braids. Instead, she froze, her greeting catching in her throat. There stood Eliza, her head completely shaved, pale scalp visible under the harsh fluorescent lights. The little girl stepped hesitantly into the classroom, her Hello Kitty doll clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. The room fell silent as children turned to stare. "Why do you look like a boy now?" Tyler blurted out from the back row, followed by scattered giggles. Ms. Rowan quickly intervened. "That's enough, Tyler. Everyone, please take out your reading journals." As the children reluctantly turned their attention away, Ms. Rowan knelt beside Eliza's desk. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said softly. "How are you today?" Eliza's small fingers traced circles on her desk. "I'm okay," she whispered, not meeting Ms. Rowan's eyes. "Your hair looks different today," Ms. Rowan said gently. That's when Eliza looked up, and what troubled Ms. Rowan wasn't the missing hair. Children did impulsive things sometimes, but the strange smile that didn't reach her eyes as she said words no. 6-year-old should ever say, "Now he won't like me anymore." A chill ran down Ms. Rowan's spine. In nearly 4 decades of teaching, she'd learned to recognize when something wasn't right. Children cut their hair for fun, for attention, even out of curiosity, but never with that hollow look in their eyes, never with that practiced smile hiding something darker. "Who won't like you, Eliza?" she asked carefully. The little girl's smile faltered for just a moment before returning, brighter but somehow more brittle. "Nobody. I just wanted to look different." She hugged her Hello Kitty doll closer. "Can I go to my seat now?" Ms. Rowan nodded, watching as Eliza walked to her desk, her small shoulders rigid under her too large sweater. The other children whispered and pointed, but Eliza kept her eyes forward, that strange smile fixed firmly in place. Something was wrong in Eliza Parker's world, and as the morning lessons began, Ms. Rowan couldn't shake the feeling that the little girl's haircut wasn't a childish whim. It was a cry for help. The next few days at Oakwood Elementary revealed subtle changes in Eliza that only someone as observant as Ms. Rowan would notice. During morning circle time, the little girl flinched when the classroom door closed too loudly. At lunch, while other children traded cookies and laughed over juice boxes, Eliza sat quietly with nothing but a small piece of plain bread on her tray. "Aren't you hungry for more than that, Eliza?" Ms. Rowan asked on Wednesday, sitting beside her at the lunch table. Eliza shrugged her thin shoulders. "I'm on a special diet," she said, the words sounding rehearsed. Then more quietly, "Grandma says I don't need much food right now." Ms. Rowan made a mental note to check Eliza's emergency contact information. The girl had mentioned living with her grandmother several times, but Ms. Rowan had never met the woman at any school functions. Later that afternoon, during art time, Ms. Rowan gave the class an assignment to draw their families. The children eagerly grabbed colorful markers, creating stick figures with wild hair and big smiles. Eliza, however, worked with intense concentration, her small hand moving deliberately across the paper. When Ms. Rowan walked by to check her progress, what she saw made her pause. Eliza had drawn herself with long hair, not her current shaved head. Behind her stood a large, dark figure with heavy black eyes looming over the child in the drawing. In the corner, written in Eliza's careful first-grade handwriting, were the words, "With hair he likes more." "Who's this in your picture, Eliza?" Ms. Rowan asked, keeping her voice casual despite the unease growing in her chest. Eliza quickly flipped the paper over. "Nobody, just made-up people." After school, Ms. Rowan retrieved the drawing from Eliza's folder and studied it in the quiet of her empty classroom. Something about the dark figure troubled her deeply. She carefully folded the drawing and placed it in her desk drawer, locking it with a small key as though preserving evidence. That evening, Ms. Rowan called the emergency number listed in Eliza's file. "The number you have reached is no longer in service," an automated voice announced. She tried the alternative number with the same result. The next morning, Ms. Rowan watched as Eliza arrived at school, noting how the girl lingered at the classroom door until the final bell, as though reluctant to leave the safety of school. When dismissal time came at the end of the day, while other children rushed to greet parents, Eliza packed her backpack. With deliberate slowness, "Is someone coming to pick you up today, Eliza?" Ms. Rowan asked. "Grandma," Eliza replied, "but it's okay if she's late. I don't mind waiting." Through the classroom window, Ms. Rowan observed an older sedan pull into the parking lot. She noticed how Eliza's shoulders hunched slightly at the sight of the car, her grip tightening on her Hello Kitty doll. "Is that your grandmother's car?" Ms. Rowan asked. Eliza nodded, her eyes downcast. "Her and her friend. He drives her places." "Would you like me to meet them?" Ms. Rowan offered. Panic flashed across Eliza's face. "No, Grandma doesn't like to get out of the car. She gets tired easy." As Eliza walked reluctantly toward the exit, Ms. Rowan made a decision. Tomorrow she would call the school counselor. The missing contact information, the strange drawing, the inadequate lunches, and most troubling of all, that haunting phrase, "Now he won't like me anymore," all pointed to something deeply wrong in Eliza Parker's life. The mystery of what had happened to Eliza's hair was just the beginning of a much darker story. The Hello Kitty doll never left Eliza's side. During reading time, it sat propped against her desk. At lunch, it occupied the seat beside her. Even at recess, when most children abandoned their belongings to race across the playground, Eliza kept the doll tucked safely under her arm. Ms. Rowan had seen children with comfort objects before, but something about Eliza's attachment seemed different, more desperate, as though the worn plush toy provided more than just comfort. On Friday morning, during free playtime, Jordan, a friendly boy with boundless energy, approached Eliza as she sat alone in the reading corner. "Can I see your kitty?" he asked, reaching for the doll. Eliza's reaction was immediate and startling. She clutched Hello Kitty to her chest and backed against the bookshelf, eyes wide with fear. "No, don't touch her!" The classroom fell silent as children turned to stare. Jordan stepped back, confusion written across his face. "I just wanted to look," he mumbled, retreating to the blocks area. Ms. Rowan approached slowly and sat on the carpet beside Eliza. "It's okay to say no when you don't want someone to touch your things," she assured the girl. "But Jordan wouldn't have hurt your doll. He's a kind boy." Eliza's eyes remained fixed on her lap. "Hello Kitty doesn't like to be touched by strangers," she whispered. After a pause, she added, "She gets scared." Later that day, while the children worked on math worksheets, Ms. Rowan observed Eliza whispering to her doll. Pretending to help another student nearby, she managed to catch snippets of the one-sided conversation. "We're safe at school," Eliza murmured, stroking the doll's ear. "He doesn't touch you. He never touches you." A chill ran through Ms. Rowan's body. There was that "he" again, the unnamed presence that seemed to hover at the edges of Eliza's words. During recess, Ms. Rowan sought out Linda Patel, the school counselor. "I'm concerned about Eliza Parker," she explained, describing the haircut, the drawing, and the intense attachment to the doll. Linda's expression grew serious. Those could be signs of something concerning at home. Has she made any direct statements that worry you? Ms. Rowan hesitated. Nothing explicit, but there's a he she mentions. Someone who liked her hair, someone who apparently doesn't touch her doll. Keep documenting everything, Linda advised. I'll schedule some time with her next week. In the meantime, be her safe. Space, Catherine. Sometimes all it takes is one attentive adult to notice what others miss. That afternoon, Ms. Rowan invited Eliza to help organize the classroom library during lunch. As they shelved books together, Ms. Rowan asked casual questions about home. Does your grandmother read to you at night, Eliza? Sometimes, Eliza replied, when her friend isn't there. And who is her friend? Does he live with you both? Eliza's hands stilled on the book she was holding. His name is Mr. Ray. He helps Grandma with money and driving places. Her voice dropped lower. He says I'm expensive to take care of. I see, Ms. Rowan said, keeping her tone light. And does Mr. Ray take good care of you too? Eliza didn't answer directly. Instead, she held her Hello Kitty doll closer and whispered something that made Ms. Rowan's heart sink. Hello Kitty hides with me when he gets mad. She's braver than me. As the day ended and children filed out to waiting cars and buses, Ms. Rowan watched Eliza linger by the classroom door, her eyes anxiously scanning the parking lot. When the familiar sedan appeared, the little girl's entire body tensed. Something was very wrong in Eliza Parker's home, and the Hello Kitty doll seemed to be the only witness to whatever shadows lurked there. Monday morning arrived with a thunderstorm that matched Ms. Rowan's troubled mood. She'd spent the weekend researching child protection procedures and rehearsing what she would say when she made the call. She knew was necessary. As raindrops pounded against the classroom windows, the children worked on spelling exercises. Ms. Rowan noticed Eliza jumping at each crack of thunder, her pencil making jagged marks across her paper. It's just the sky making noise, Ms. Rowan assured her quietly. You're safe in here. Eliza nodded but kept her eyes on the windows as though expecting something or someone to appear there. During her planning period, Ms. Rowan closed her classroom door and dialed Child Protective Services. Her hands trembled slightly as she explained her concerns to the intake worker. I understand there are no visible marks, she said after detailing her observations. But this child is showing signs of emotional distress. The haircut, the inadequate food, the fear responses, and comments about him liking her hair. It all points to something troubling, the intake worker asked. Worker? Several detailed questions, then informed Ms. Rowan that they would assign a social worker to assess the situation. We'll send someone to observe the child at school first. It's less disruptive that way. True to their word, the next afternoon brought Maggie Torres, a social worker with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She introduced herself to Ms. Rowan before classes ended. I'd like to meet Eliza casually today, then perhaps have a more structured conversation tomorrow, Maggie explained. The goal is to make her comfortable with me before asking any direct questions. Ms. Rowan arranged for Maggie to assist during art time, moving between tables as children created collages from magazine cutouts. When she reached Eliza's table, Maggie knelt down with a warm smile. That's a beautiful flower you've cut out, she commented, pointing to a bright yellow daisy on Eliza's paper. Eliza regarded the stranger warily, pulling Hello Kitty closer to her side. Thank you, she whispered. And who's your friend? Maggie asked, nodding toward the doll. A flicker of protection crossed Eliza's face. This is Hello Kitty. She goes everywhere with me. She must be a very good friend, Maggie said. I had a special stuffed animal when I was your age too. Mine was a blue elephant named Trunk. Eliza's lips twitched in the hint of a smile. That's a funny name. I wasn't very creative, Maggie laughed. Does your Hello Kitty have any special talents? Eliza hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. She's really good at hiding, she confided, and she never tells secrets. Those are excellent talents, Maggie said seriously. Everyone needs a friend who can keep secrets. Ms. Rowan watched the interaction from across the room, hope rising in her chest as Eliza gradually relaxed in Maggie's presence. The next day, Maggie returned with a small box of crayons and a sketch pad. With Ms. Rowan's permission, she invited Eliza to draw pictures with her in a quiet corner of the classroom, while the other children had computer time. "I'd like to know more about you, Eliza," Maggie said as they colored side by side. "Who lives in your house with you?" "Me and Grandma," Eliza replied, selecting a brown crayon. After a pause, she added, "And Grandma's friend sometimes, Mr. Ray." "Is Mr. Ray nice to you?" Maggie asked, keeping her tone conversational. Eliza's crayon stilled on the paper. "He's nice to Grandma," she said carefully. "He brings her medicine and drives her car." "But is he nice to you?" Maggie repeated gently. Instead of answering, Eliza changed the subject. "Do you have children at your house?" "I have a daughter who's a bit older than you," Maggie replied. "She likes to draw, too." As their time together ended, Eliza suddenly looked up at Maggie with an intensity that seemed beyond her 6 years. "Do I have to go home today?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Maggie exchanged a glance with Ms. Rowan, who had approached to check on them. "Yes, sweetheart," Maggie said carefully, "but I'll see you again tomorrow, okay?" As Eliza packed her backpack at the end of the day, both women noticed how the little girl's movements grew slower, more reluctant, as dismissal time approached, like a small animal sensing danger but unable to escape it. The following morning, Maggie informed Ms. Rowan that she planned to visit Eliza's home that afternoon. "I need to assess the living conditions and meet the grandmother," she explained. "It's standard procedure." "Will you tell them about our concerns?" Ms. Rowan asked, worry creasing her brow. "I'll be diplomatic," Maggie assured her. "These initial visits are presented as routine welfare checks. We don't want to create a situation that might make things worse for Eliza." Throughout the day, Ms. Rowan kept a watchful eye on her young student. Eliza seemed more withdrawn than usual, her responses in class barely audible. During math lesson, when the classroom phone rang unexpectedly, Eliza dropped her pencil and covered her ears. "It's just the office calling, sweetheart," Ms. Rowan said gently, kneeling beside Eliza's desk. "Nothing to worry about." The little girl nodded, but her hands trembled as she picked up her pencil again. At lunch, Ms. Rowan noticed Eliza had even less food than usual, just half a slice of white bread. When offered part of the teacher's apple, Eliza shook her head vigorously. "I'm not allowed extra food this week," she whispered. Later that afternoon, Principal Harriet Blackwell summoned Ms. Rowan to her office. The principal's expression was stern as she closed the door behind them. "Catherine, I've received a concerning call from Eliza Parker's grandmother," she began, folding her hands on her desk. "She claims you've been asking intrusive questions about their home life and making Eliza uncomfortable." Ms. Rowan straightened in her chair. "That's simply not true, Harriet. I've been monitoring a situation that raised red flags. You know I wouldn't overreact after 38 years in the classroom." "Nevertheless," Principal Blackwell continued, "we need to be cautious about overstepping boundaries. Mrs. Parker was quite upset about a social worker showing up at her door today." "What happened?" Ms. Rowan asked. "Apparently, Mrs. Parker refused entry to Ms. Torres and called our district office immediately after. She's threatening to file a formal complaint against you in the school. Harriet, something is wrong in that home," Ms. Rowan insisted. "Eliza shows signs of neglect, possibly worse. She's afraid to go home, barely eats, and made disturbing comments about her grandmother's male friend." The principal sighed. "Just be careful, Catherine. Follow proper protocols. Document everything. Without concrete evidence, we're limited in what we can do." When Ms. Rowan returned to her classroom, Maggie was waiting. Her expression confirmed what Principal Blackwell had already revealed. "It didn't go well," Maggie admitted. "Mrs. Parker refused to let me inside, claimed Eliza was perfectly fine, and said the haircut was just a phase her granddaughter was going through. She was extremely defensive. That only makes me more concerned, Ms. Rowan said. Me too, Maggie agreed. I'm going to request a more formal investigation, but these things take time. Meanwhile, keep doing what you're doing, being Eliza's safe person at school. As dismissal time approached, Ms. Rowan watched Eliza pack her backpack with the same reluctant slowness that had become a daily ritual. Through the classroom window, she could see cars beginning to line up in the pickup lane. When the familiar sedan appeared, she noticed how Eliza's small shoulders hunched immediately, her body physically recoiling at the sight. "Eliza," Ms. Rowan said gently, "would you like me to walk you out today?" The little girl clutched her Hello Kitty doll tighter. "No, thank you," she whispered, her eyes downcast. "Grandma doesn't like when teachers come to the car." Ms. Rowan felt helpless as she watched Eliza walk slowly toward the exit, each step seeming heavier than the last. Just before leaving the classroom, Eliza turned back. "Ms. Rowan," she said softly, "Hello Kitty told me she likes school best. She says it's the safest place." The words echoed in Ms. Rowan's mind long after Eliza had gone, a reminder of what was at stake and why she couldn't give up. Despite the resistance she now faced from both Eliza's family and her own administration, the cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chaos. Children chattering, lunchboxes clicking open, the clatter of plastic trays. Ms. Rowan supervised from the side, her eyes frequently drifting to Eliza, who sat alone at the end of a long table. Unlike previous days when she at least had bread, today Eliza's spot before her was empty. No lunchbox, no brown paper bag, nothing but the familiar Hello Kitty doll propped against her water bottle. "Didn't you bring lunch today, Eliza?" asked Tommy, a bit kind-hearted boy who sat across from her. Eliza shook her head slightly. "I forgot," she whispered, though something in her eyes suggested otherwise. Ms. Rowan was making her way toward Eliza when it happened. The little girl stood up suddenly, swayed on her feet, and then collapsed to the floor before anyone could reach her. "Eliza!" Ms. Rowan rushed forward, heart pounding. She knelt beside the small, crumpled form as children gathered around, wide-eyed and whispering. The school nurse arrived within minutes, calmly checking Eliza's pulse and breathing. "She's fainted," she announced, her experienced hands already elevating the child's feet. "Let's get her to my office." Eliza regained consciousness as they carried her, blinking in confusion. "Hello, Kitty," she murmured weakly. "Where's Hello Kitty?" "Right here, sweetheart," Ms. Rowan assured her, tucking the doll beside her on the nurse's cot. In the quiet of the nurse's office, away from curious eyes, Nurse Jenkins conducted a more thorough examination. "Her blood sugar is quite low," she noted, reviewing the glucometer reading. "When was the last time you ate something, Eliza?" The little girl's eyes darted nervously between the adults. "Yesterday morning," she finally admitted. "I had cereal." "Yesterday morning?" Nurse Jenkins repeated, exchanging a troubled glance with Ms. Rowan. "That's a very long time for a growing girl to go without food. Why haven't you eaten since then?" Eliza clutched Hello Kitty closer. "I'm on food punishment," she said softly, then immediately backtracked. I just wasn't hungry. My tummy felt funny." "Food punishment?" Nurse Jenkins echoed, her professional demeanor slipping momentarily. Ms. Rowan stepped in gently. "Eliza, everyone needs to eat even when they're in trouble. It's not safe to skip meals." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "Mr. Ray says I eat too much. He says food costs money, and I already cost too much." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Nurse Jenkins quietly documented the statement, while Ms. Rowan sat on the edge of the cot. "I'm going to get you something to eat right now," Ms. Rowan said firmly. "Would you like a sandwich or some pasta from the cafeteria?" Eliza shrank back against the pillow. "I can't," she whispered. "He checks my backpack sometimes to make sure I don't take extra food home." "This isn't for home," Ms. Rowan clarified. "This is for right now, to help you feel better." Still, Eliza hesitated, eyes wide with fear. It was only when Ms. Rowan added softly, "Nobody will be upset if you eat, Eliza. I promise," that the child gave a tiny nod of permission. While Nurse Jenkins stayed with Eliza, Ms. Rowan hurried to the cafeteria, returning with a turkey sandwich, apple slices, and chocolate milk. She watched with a mixture of relief and heartbreak as Eliza ate slowly at first, then with increasing urgency as her body responded to the nourishment it desperately needed. Between bites, Eliza began to talk, more openly than she ever had before. "My mom went away when I was little," she said, eyes on her sandwich. "I don't remember her much, just that she smelled like flowers." "And you've lived with your grandmother since then?" Ms. Rowan prompted gently. Eliza nodded. Grandma gets tired. She sleeps a lot and takes medicine that makes her dizzy. Mr. Ray helps her with money and driving places." "How long has Mr. Ray been staying with you and your grandmother?" Eliza thought for a moment. "Since after Christmas. Grandma says he's her special friend." Her voice dropped lower. "But he doesn't like children very much, especially not little girls with pretty hair." The implication of those innocent words sent a chill through Ms. Rowan's heart. Nurse Jenkins, who had been writing notes, paused, her pen hovering over the page. "Is that why you cut your hair, Eliza?" Ms. Rowan asked carefully. "So you wouldn't have pretty hair anymore?" But Eliza had said too much already. She set down her half-eaten sandwich and pulled Hello Kitty closer. "I'm tired now," she murmured, turning her face toward the wall. As Eliza drifted into an exhausted sleep, Ms. Rowan and Nurse Jenkins stepped outside the office to confer. "I'm calling Child Protective Services again," Nurse Jenkins said firmly. "Food deprivation is a clear form of neglect. This goes beyond concerning. It's dangerous." The call from Nurse Jenkins to Child Protective Services set off a chain of events that brought Eliza's grandmother to Oakwood Elementary the very next morning. Ms. Rowan was in the middle of a reading lesson when Principal Blackwell appeared at her classroom door. "Mrs. Parker is here for a conference," she announced, her tone professional but tense. "Mrs. Wilson will cover your class." Into the conference room, Eliza's grandmother sat stiffly in a chair, her thin frame nearly swallowed by an oversized cardigan. Martha Parker appeared to be in her late 60s, with deep lines etched around her eyes and mouth, and hands that trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. Beside her sat Maggie Torres, who had returned to represent Child Protective Services. Principal Blackwell took a seat at the head of the table while Ms. Rowan sat across from Mrs. Parker. "Thank you for coming in today, Mrs. Parker," Principal Blackwell began. "We wanted to discuss some concerns we have about Eliza's well-being." "There's nothing to discuss," Mrs. Parker interrupted, her voice surprisingly firm despite her fragile appearance. "Eliza is fine. Children make up stories all the time." Ms. Rowan leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Parker, Eliza fainted yesterday because she hadn't eaten since the previous morning. She mentioned something called food punishment. A flash of something, guilt, fear, crossed the grandmother's face before she composed herself. Eliza misunderstood. She wasn't feeling well, so I told her to eat lightly. Children exaggerate. She had nothing to eat, Ms. Rowan. Pressed. Not even a piece of fruit or crackers." Mrs. Parker's fingers twisted the edge of her cardigan. "I've been unwell lately. Sometimes I forget things. It won't happen again." Maggie Torres spoke up gently. "Mrs. Parker, we understand caring for a young child can be challenging, especially when you're not feeling well yourself. There are resources available to help you. Food assistance programs, community support services. We don't need charity," Mrs. Parker cut in sharply. "Raymond, Mr. Williams, helps us with finances. He's very generous." "Is Mr. Williams the friend who stays with you?" Maggie asked. Mrs. Parker's posture stiffened further. "Raymond is my companion. He helps me care for Eliza while I work night shifts at the care facility. I don't see how my personal relationships are any of your business." "We're only concerned about Eliza," Ms. Rowan said softly. "She seems afraid to go home, Mrs. Parker. And the incident with her hair. That was a misunderstanding, Mrs. Parker exclaimed, voice rising. She got gum in it, and we had to cut it out. Raymond suggested just shaving it all since it was uneven. It'll grow back. The explanation sounded rehearsed, not matching Eliza's own words about why she'd cut her hair. Ms. Rowan exchanged a glance with Maggie, who made a note in her file. Mrs. Parker, Principal Blackwell interjected calmly, no one is accusing you of anything. We all want what's best for Eliza. But when a child comes to school unfed, makes concerning statements and shows signs of emotional distress, we are legally obligated to follow up. The grandmother's shoulders sagged slightly, the defensive facade cracking. I'm doing my best, she whispered. It's not easy since my daughter left. Eliza needs stability. Raymond provides that. Does Raymond interact much with Eliza? Maggie asked. A shadow passed over Mrs. Parker's face. He's not comfortable around children. He stays in his workshop when Eliza is home. It's better that way. His workshop? Ms. Rowan inquired. The garage. He fixes things. Mrs. Parker glanced at her. Watch. I need to get back to Eliza now. I've taken time off work for this meeting. As the conference concluded, Principal Blackwell escorted Mrs. Parker to Eliza's classroom to pick her up, even though it was the middle of the school day. Ms. Rowan and Maggie remained in the conference room, processing what they'd heard. She's hiding something, Ms. Rowan said quietly. That story about the gum in Eliza's hair doesn't match what Eliza told me. I agree, Maggie replied, reviewing her notes. And did you notice how she tensed up whenever we mentioned this Raymond person? I'm going to request a home visit with a police escort this time. We need to see this garage workshop for ourselves. When Ms. Rowan returned to her classroom, she found it empty of students. Principal Blackwell had taken them to the library. Only Eliza's desk showed signs of hasty departure. A half-completed worksheet, a pencil with the eraser still warm from use, and something that made Ms. Rowan's heart sink. Hello Kitty was still there, forgotten in the rush, sitting forlornly against the desk leg. In all the time Ms. Rowan had known Eliza, the child had never, ever left her precious doll behind. Sleep eluded Ms. Rowan that night. She tossed and turned, her mind replaying the day's events, the grandmother's defensive posture, the rehearsed explanations, and most troubling of all, the abandoned Hello Kitty doll that now sat on her nightstand. She had planned to return it to Eliza the next day, but something about having this silent witness in her possession felt significant. At 3:17 a.m., Ms. Rowan gave up on sleep. She switched on her bedside lamp and picked up the worn doll, examining it carefully. The once white fabric had yellowed with age and loving handling. One ear was slightly frayed, and the red bow was missing a few threads. This wasn't just any toy. It was Eliza's protector, her confidant, her courage. What have you seen? Ms. Rowan whispered to the unblinking button eyes. As she turned the doll over, she noticed something unusual. A small section of stitching along. The back seam looked newer than the rest, as though it had been recently resewn. Curious, Ms. Rowan gently pressed her fingers along the seam and felt something crinkle inside. With careful fingers, she located the edge of the newer stitching and gently worked it open, just enough to peek inside. There, tucked deep within the stuffing, was a folded piece of paper. Ms. Rowan hesitated, aware she was crossing a boundary, but her concern for Eliza overrode her hesitation. The note, written in a child's uneven handwriting with a purple crayon, contained just 7 words that made her blood run. Cold, please don't make me go back there. Ms. Rowan sat perfectly still, the note trembling in her hands. This wasn't just a cry for help. It was a desperate plea from a child who had hidden her message in the one place she thought was safe. For a long moment, Ms. Rowan contemplated what to do. She could wait, follow protocols, document this new evidence, and submit it through proper channels. But bureaucracy moved slowly, and Eliza needed help now. She glanced at her phone, then at the silent doll, thinking of Eliza without her protector. The image of the little girl alone in that house with the grandmother who couldn't protect her, and the man who made her afraid, crystallized Ms. Rowan's resolve. Just before reaching for her phone, Ms. Rowan's mind flashed to a scene from earlier that week. Eliza sitting quietly beside another child on the playground. Not really playing, just existing, in shared silence. The emptiness in her eyes had been haunting. It was that memory, more than anything, that propelled Ms. Rowan's finger to dial 3 numbers. 911. Emergency services. What's your emergency? A calm voice answered. My name is Catherine Rowan. I'm a teacher at Oakwood Elementary, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. I need to report a child in danger. The next few hours passed in a blur. Police officers arrived at Ms. Rowan's home to take her statement and the note. They assured her they would conduct an immediate welfare check at the Parker residence. As dawn broke, Ms. Rowan received a call from Maggie Torres. The police went to the house, Maggie explained, sounding exhausted. Mrs. Parker answered. Eliza was asleep in her bed, and nothing immediately concerning was visible. Without clearer evidence or direct disclosure from Eliza, their hands are tied. But the note, Ms. Rowan protested. It's concerning, yes, but not specific enough. Mrs. Parker claimed Eliza was just upset about being disciplined for poor behavior. The officers couldn't legally search the premises without more cause, especially the garage workshop, since Mr. Williams wasn't even home. Ms. Rowan's frustration mounted. So we just send her back day after day until something worse happens? Not exactly, Maggie said. Mrs. Parker was extremely agitated by the police visit. She called Principal Blackwell at home and filed a formal complaint against you for harassment. She's threatening to transfer Eliza to another school. Ms. Rowan felt the floor tilt beneath her. She can't do that. Eliza needs stability. She needs people watching out for her. I agree, Maggie sighed. But legally, as her guardian, Mrs. Parker has that right. There's more. Principal Blackwell called me before I called you. She's placing you on administrative leave pending review. The words hit like physical blows. Administrative leave. A formal complaint. Eliza potentially being moved beyond their reach. The carefully constructed safety net they had been. Building was unraveling. Catherine, Maggie said gently, using Ms. Rowan's first name. I know this feels like a defeat, but it's not over. Sometimes the system takes time to work. We've documented everything, raised official flags. We're watching now. After hanging up, Ms. Rowan sat in her silent kitchen, the morning light casting long shadows across the counter. Beside her coffee cup sat Hello Kitty, a silent witness to a child's fear, and now to her own. She had done what she thought was right, followed her conscience rather than protocol. Now she might lose her position, her reputation, and worst of all, her ability to protect Eliza. But as she looked at the doll's worn face, Ms. Rowan knew she would make the same choice again. Some risks were worth taking, even if you had to face the consequences alone. 3 days into her administrative leave, Ms. Rowan was going stir-crazy in her small bungalow. The silence that normally brought comfort after noisy school days now felt oppressive. She had graded papers, reorganized her bookshelves, and baked enough muffins to feed her entire class. Anything to keep her hands busy, while her mind circled endlessly around Eliza. The phones. Sudden ring cut through the quiet like a thunderclap. Catherine, it's Maggie Torres. Ms. Rowan's heart leapt. Did something happen? Is Eliza okay? There's been a development, Maggie said, her professional tone tinged with cautious optimism. The judge granted our emergency petition for temporary removal. Eliza is being placed in foster care while we conduct a more thorough investigation. What changed? Ms. Rowan asked, sinking into a kitchen chair. Eliza's substitute teacher noticed bruising on her arm yesterday. When questioned, Eliza said she fell against the workshop door. It wasn't much, but combined with everything else we've documented, it was enough for the judge. Relief washed over Ms. Rowan like a wave. Where is she now? With the Bennetts, one of our most experienced foster families. Sarah Bennett is a retired pediatric nurse, and her husband David is a counselor. They specialize in children who've experienced trauma. Ms. Rowan clutched Hello Kitty, which hadn't left her side since that night. Does she have any of her things? Her clothes? Her toys? Just what she was wearing to school. Mrs. Parker became uncooperative when the removal order was served. She needs Hello Kitty, Ms. Rowan said firmly. Can I bring it to her? There was a pause on the line. Technically, you're still on administrative leave, Catherine. You're not supposed to have contact with Eliza. Please, Maggie. That child has lost everything familiar. At least let her have her doll back. After a long moment, Maggie sighed. Meet me at West Side Park in an hour. The Bennetts often take their foster children there in the afternoons. It will seem like a coincidental meeting. The 60 minutes crawled by as Ms. Rowan prepared for the meeting. She carefully repaired the seam she had opened in Hello Kitty, then found a small red ribbon in her craft supplies to replace the doll's frayed one. She tied it into a perfect bow, a small act of love for a child who needed so much more than she could give. At the park, Ms. Rowan spotted them immediately, a kind-faced couple watching a small figure on the swings. Eliza was pushing herself listlessly back and forth, her feet dragging in the dirt below. Her hair had grown just enough to cover her head with a soft fuzz, catching the afternoon sunlight like a halo. Maggie approached the Bennetts first, speaking quietly. They nodded, watching as Ms. Rowan walked slowly toward the swings. Hello, Eliza, she said softly. The little girl looked up, her eyes widening. For a heartbreaking moment, she seemed unsure whether to approach or retreat. Then her gaze fell on the doll in Ms. Rowan's hands, and a small cry escaped her lips. Hello, Kitty, she whispered, reaching out with trembling fingers. I thought she was gone forever. She missed you very much, Ms. Rowan said, handing over the doll. See, I gave her a new ribbon. Eliza clutched Hello Kitty to her chest, burying her face in the worn fabric. When she looked up again, tears streaked her cheeks. Are you in trouble because of me? She asked, her voice small but direct. Ms. Rowan knelt to eye level. No, sweetheart, I'm not in trouble because of you. I'm just taking a little break from school. Grandma was very angry, Eliza continued, her fingers nervously stroking the doll's ear. She said teachers should mind their own business. It is my business to make sure you're safe and happy, Ms. Rowan replied gently. That's the most important part of being a teacher. They sat together on the swings side by side, speaking of small things. The Bennett's cat named Pancake, the garden at their house, the children's books on Eliza's new bookshelf. Carefully avoiding the shadows, staying in the light of ordinary conversation. As they talked, Ms. Rowan noticed subtle changes in Eliza. She was cleaner, better fed, and her eyes seemed clearer, more present, but there was still a wariness there, a child expecting the world to shatter again at any moment. Do you like staying with Mr. and Mrs. Bennett? Ms. Rowan asked carefully. Eliza nodded slowly. They're nice. Mrs. Bennett lets me help make pancakes, and they have, nightlights in every room. That sounds lovely. Eliza's swing slowed until she was barely moving. But Grandma is all alone now, she whispered. With him. The way she said him sent chills down Ms. Rowan's spine. Your grandmother's friend? She prompted gently. Eliza nodded, her eyes fixed on the ground. He gets mad when things aren't perfect. He doesn't like children, especially. Her voice dropped even lower. Especially when they look pretty. The implication hung in the air between them, a dark cloud over the peaceful park scene. Is that why you cut your hair, Eliza? Ms. Rowan asked, her heart pounding. Before Eliza could answer, Mrs. Bennett approached, signaling that their time was up. As the foster mother gently led Eliza away, the little girl looked back once. Hello Kitty clutched protectively against her chest. Thank you for bringing her back, she called, and Ms. Rowan knew she meant more than just the doll. The fragile peace that had settled over Ms. Rowan after seeing Eliza safe with the Bennetts lasted exactly 6 days. On the 7th morning, her doorbell rang just as she was pouring her first cup of coffee. Maggie Torres stood on her porch, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept well. Can I come in? she asked, her usual professional demeanor strained. Ms. Rowan's stomach tightened as she led Maggie to the kitchen table. What's happened? Maggie set her briefcase down heavily. The investigation has hit a wall. Raymond Williams has a spotless record, not even a parking ticket. The garage workshop was clean when officers finally got a warrant to search it. Mrs. Parker has completed 3 supervised visits with Eliza without incident and has begun mandatory parenting classes. That sounds like progress, Ms. Rowan said, cautiously. It would be, except for one thing. Maggie pulled out a folder. The judge has scheduled a hearing for next week to consider returning Eliza to her grandmother's custody. Ms. Rowan felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. But it's only been a week. Eliza is just starting to feel safe. I know, Maggie agreed, frustration evident in her voice. But without more concrete evidence of danger, the court leans toward family reunification. Mrs. Parker has secured a separate apartment from Mr. Williams, at least on paper, and is making all the right moves to satisfy the court. What about what Eliza has said? The note in Hello Kitty, her comments about her appearance making this man angry? Troubling, yes, but not specific enough in legal terms. Children's statements need corroboration, especially at her age. Maggie rubbed her temples. The system is designed to give families every chance to stay together, sometimes at the expense of caution. Ms. Rowan thought of Eliza's face at the park, the tentative hope beginning to bloom there. Have you told her yet? The Bennetts will explain it today. They're experts at preparing children for transitions. Maggie hesitated. But there's more. The principal called me this morning. Mrs. Parker is withdrawing Eliza from Oakwood Elementary. If she regains custody, Eliza will be attending Pinecrest Academy across town. The news felt like a physical blow. Not only would Eliza return to her grandmother's care, but she would lose the safety net of familiar teachers who knew her situation. They can't do this, Ms. Rowan whispered. They can't just erase all our concerns and send her back. I'm still fighting, Maggie assured her. But I wanted you to know what we're up against. After Maggie left, Ms. Rowan spent the day in a fog of worry. She was due to return to teaching the following Monday. Her administrative leave had been resolved with a formal warning about maintaining appropriate boundaries. But the thought of entering her classroom without Eliza's quiet presence felt wrong, like a book missing. Its most important chapter. That evening her phone rang again. It was Sarah Bennett, the foster mother. I hope it's okay that Maggie gave me your number, she began. I thought you should know about Eliza's reaction to the news. Ms. Rowan braced herself. How did she take it? She didn't cry or throw a tantrum like most children might, Sarah said, concern evident in her voice. She just went very quiet. Later I found her in the bathroom, hiding behind the shower curtain. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was practicing being invisible. Ms. Rowan closed her eyes against the pain of that image. But that's not why I called, Sarah continued. After dinner I noticed something else. Eliza has stopped talking to Hello Kitty. What do you mean? Since she's been with us, she's had whispered conversations with that doll every night before bed. Tonight, I watched her put Hello Kitty on the shelf instead of taking her to bed. When I asked why, Eliza just said, she's tired of listening. The word sent a chill through Ms. Rowan. In all her years of teaching, she'd observed that when children stopped playing, stopped engaging with their comfort objects, it signaled a dangerous level of emotional shutdown. She's disengaging, Ms. Rowan said, the teacher in her recognizing the warning sign. Protecting herself by detaching. That's what David thought too, Sarah agreed, referring to her counselor husband. He says it's like she's preparing herself for whatever comes next by going numb. Maggie needs to know this, Ms. Rowan insisted. This kind of emotional withdrawal is significant. We've already called her, Sarah assured her. But I thought you should know too. You seem to understand Eliza in a special way. After they hung up, Ms. Rowan sat in her silent living room, the weight of helplessness pressing down on her. The system designed to protect children was moving too slowly, demanding too much proof while a little girl practiced being invisible. In the corner of her living room stood her school bag, packed and ready for her return to the classroom on Monday. Beside it was a small gift she had bought for Eliza, a children's book about a brave girl who saved her family from a storm. Now she wondered if Eliza would ever receive it. "She's shutting down inside," Ms. Rowan whispered to herself, echoing what the Bennetts had observed. "We're losing her." The clock ticked relentlessly forward, counting down the days until the hearing that might send Eliza back into the shadows. The courthouse loomed large and imposing, its stone steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps seeking justice. Ms. Rowan clutched her purse tightly as she climbed those steps, her heart pounding with each upward step. Although she had no official role in today's hearing, Maggie had called late the previous night with unexpected news. "The judge wants to hear from Eliza directly," she had explained. "In his chambers, not the courtroom. He's allowing one support person for Eliza, and she's asked for you." Now, in the echoing marble hallway, Ms. Rowan spotted Eliza sitting on a wooden bench between Sarah Bennett and Maggie. The child looked impossibly small in her navy blue dress, her fuzzy hair combed neatly, her eyes downcast. Hello Kitty sat in her lap, but Ms. Rowan noticed how loosely Eliza held the doll. Not clutched protectively as before, but limply, like an ordinary object rather than a lifeline. "Ms. Rowan." Eliza's face brightened momentarily when she looked up, the first genuine emotion Ms. Rowan had seen since entering the building. "Hello, sweetheart," she replied, taking a seat beside the child. "Thank you for asking me to be here with you today." Eliza nodded solemnly. "Hello Kitty said you should come," she whispered, then glanced around as though checking who might have heard her. "I mean, I wanted you to come." Ms. Rowan noticed the self-correction, the child catching herself anthropomorphizing her doll, trying to appear more grown-up for the court proceedings. It broke her heart to see Eliza feeling she needed to hide even this innocent aspect of childhood. While they waited for the judge, Ms. Rowan observed Eliza continuously adjusting something inside her doll, small fingers working through the fabric. "Is Hello Kitty uncomfortable?" she asked gently. Eliza shook her head. "She has a secret pocket," she confided, her voice barely audible, "for important things." Before Ms. Rowan could inquire further, a court officer approached. "The judge is ready for Eliza Parker and her support person," he announced. Inside the judge's chambers, the formal atmosphere was softened somewhat by family photos on the desk and a small basket of fidget toys clearly meant for children. Judge Harmon, an older man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, sat not behind his imposing desk, but in an armchair, creating a less intimidating environment. "Hello, Eliza," he said warmly. "Thank you for coming to talk with me today." "Is that your special friend?" he asked, nodding toward Hello Kitty. Eliza nodded, her grip on the doll tightening slightly. "I had a teddy bear when I was your age," the judge shared. "His name was Captain, and he went everywhere with me. Do you take Hello Kitty everywhere too?" Another small nod. "Eliza," Judge Harmon continued gently, "I need to make some important decisions. About where you'll live. Would you feel comfortable telling me a little about your grandmother's house?" Ms. Rowan watched as Eliza's shoulders tensed, her fingers working nervously at Hello Kitty's side. "It's okay," the judge assured her. "You can take your time." After a long silence, Eliza spoke. Eliza, so softly they had to lean forward to hear. "Grandma's house is dark. The curtains stay closed because the light hurts her eyes." "I see. And what about your room there? Do you like it?" Eliza shrugged. "It's okay, but the closet door doesn't lock from the inside." The casual observation sent chills down Ms. Rowan's spine. "Why would you want a lock on the inside of your closet?" Judge Harmon asked, maintaining his gentle tone despite the concerning implication. "For hiding games," Eliza replied as though the answer were obvious. "Sometimes you need to be very quiet during hiding games." "And who do you play these hiding games with?" Eliza's fingers worked more frantically at Hello Kitty's side. "Nobody, just me and Hello Kitty." Judge Harmon changed direction. I understand your grandmother has a friend who visits sometimes. Can you tell me about him? At this, Eliza went completely. Still, her eyes fixed on the floor. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Eliza, the judge prompted. He doesn't like children, she finally whispered. Especially not me. Why do you think that is? Another long pause. Hello, Kitty knows, Eliza said cryptically, then fell silent again. Throughout the gentle questioning, Ms. Rowan noticed Eliza becoming increasingly focused on adjusting something inside her doll. When Judge Harmon called for a brief break, allowing Eliza to use the restroom with Sarah Bennett, Maggie pulled Ms. Rowan aside in the hallway. She's hiding something in that doll, Maggie observed. Something beyond emotional comfort. Ms. Rowan nodded. She mentioned a secret pocket earlier. I've noticed her constantly adjusting it these past few days, Maggie said. Like she's checking that something's still there. I haven't wanted to violate her trust by asking to look inside, but you think it might be important for the case, Ms. Rowan finished. I do, Maggie admitted. But after everything she's been through, the last thing I want is to take away her sense of control by forcing her to share something she's not ready to. When Eliza returned, she seemed even more withdrawn, clinging to Hello Kitty with renewed intensity. As they prepared to re-enter the judge's chambers, Eliza suddenly turned to Maggie. Hello Kitty wants to stay with you, she said abruptly, thrusting the doll toward the social worker. Maggie blinked in surprise. Are you sure, Eliza? You love Hello Kitty. She needs to stay with you for now, Eliza insisted, her eyes conveying something deeper than her words. She's safer with you. Maggie accepted the doll solemnly, recognizing the profound weight of this gesture. She held Hello Kitty against her chest, cradling it as carefully as if it were Eliza herself, a silent promise to protect what mattered most to the child. As they watched Eliza walk bravely back into the judge's chambers alone, Ms. Rowan and Maggie exchanged a glance of mutual understanding. Whatever secret Hello Kitty held, Eliza had just entrusted it to them, and they would not let her down. The hearing continued for another hour, with various testimonies from Mrs. Parker, the court-appointed psychologist, and the Bennetts. Throughout it all, Maggie sat with Hello Kitty carefully placed on her lap, acutely aware of the trust Eliza had placed in her by surrendering her most precious possession. When the proceedings finally adjourned, the judge announced he would take the weekend to consider his decision, leaving everyone in painful suspense. Eliza was escorted back to the Bennett's care for what might be her final weekend with them. As the courthouse emptied, Maggie found herself alone on a bench in the now quiet hallway, still holding the worn doll. Ms. Rowan had left reluctantly, called away to a mandatory faculty meeting at Oakwood Elementary. What are you hiding? Maggie whispered to the silent Hello Kitty, running her fingers along the seams of the doll. For several minutes she debated with herself. Examining the doll's contents felt like an invasion of Eliza's privacy, yet the child had deliberately given Hello Kitty to her. Not to the Bennetts, not to Ms. Rowan, but to her, the person responsible for presenting evidence to the court. Maggie's hand hesitated at the small, almost invisible seam along Hello Kitty's back. She nearly decided to wait, to respect Eliza's space a little longer. But something about the urgency in the child's eyes when she had handed over the doll tugged at her professional instincts. With careful fingers, she gently explored the seam, feeling something solid beneath the stuffing. Her heart began to pound. This wasn't just a child's whim. Eliza had hidden something deliberately. The courthouse janitor's footsteps echoed down the hall, approaching to clean the now empty rooms. It was now or never. Gently, Maggie worked her finger into the small opening in the seam, feeling the crinkle of paper against her fingertip. With utmost care, she extracted a folded piece of notebook paper, flattened and worn as though it had been handled many times. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. Written in purple crayon, in the careful lettering of a child trying her best to be clear, was a message that made Maggie's blood run cold. Look in the garage behind the metal door. That's where he keeps the bad pictures. Below this was a childish drawing of what appeared to be a workbench with a door behind it, labeled Secret Room. Maggie stared at the note, her professional composure cracking. In all her years as a social worker, she had developed the emotional armor necessary for her difficult job. But something about this simple crayon message, the courage it must have taken for Eliza to write it, the trust it represented, broke through those defenses. She carefully refolded the note and tucked it into her case file. Then, with hands that weren't quite steady, she reached for her phone and dialed Judge Harmon's chambers. "This is Maggie Torres from Child Protective Services," she said when the clerk answered. "I need to speak with the judge immediately. We have new evidence in the Parker case." 30 minutes later, Maggie sat across from Judge Harmon, the note placed carefully on his desk between them. The judge read it. Silently, his expression grave. "How certain are we that this is authentic?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already believed it was. "Completely certain," Maggie replied. "It matches Eliza's handwriting from her school assignments, and more importantly, it explains her cryptic comments about Hello Kitty knowing things and being safer with me." Judge Harmon removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "This changes things significantly. I'll issue an emergency search warrant for the Parker residence, specifically for this garage and any hidden areas within it." He looked up at Maggie, his eyes reflecting decades of experience with the darkest sides of humanity. "Make sure Detective Larson handles this personally. He has experience with sensitive cases involving children." As Maggie left the courthouse, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. The search would happen tonight while Eliza was safely with the Bennetts, away from whatever might unfold at her grandmother's house. She called Ms. Rowan from her car. "Catherine, something's happening," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Eliza had hidden a note inside Hello Kitty, a very specific note about where to look in that garage. "Oh my God," Ms. Rowan breathed. "What did it say?" "I can't share the details yet," Maggie replied, maintaining professional boundaries despite her personal connection to the case. But it was enough for Judge Harmon to issue an immediate search warrant. "The police are going there tonight." "Will this be enough?" Ms. Rowan asked, the question that had haunted them both for weeks. "If they find what Eliza described," Maggie said carefully, "then yes, more than enough." That evening, as darkness fell over the city, Maggie sat in her parked car half a block from the Parker residence, watching as unmarked police vehicles quietly surrounded the modest bungalow. Detective Larson's team approached with the practiced efficiency of officers who understood the gravity of their task. In her lap, Maggie still held Hello Kitty now, emptied of its secret but no less precious. "You did well," she whispered to the silent doll. "You kept her secret safe until exactly the right moment." As officers disappeared into the house and garage, Maggie sent a silent promise to Eliza that whatever happened next, the child would never have to be invisible again. Morning light filtered through the blinds of the small conference room, where Ms. Rowan waited anxiously. Maggie had called at dawn, asking her to come to the Child Protective Services office as soon as possible. The urgency in her voice had sent Ms. Rowan rushing out the door, barely pausing to grab her coat. Now, as the wall clock ticked loudly in the quiet room, Ms. Rowan's mind raced with possibilities. What had the police found? Was Eliza safe? The waiting felt unbearable. The door finally opened, and Maggie entered with Detective Larson, a tall man with kind eyes. That seemed at odds with his otherwise imposing presence. Both carried the weary look of people who hadn't slept. "Thank you for coming, Catherine," Maggie said, taking a seat across from her. "A lot happened last night, and we wanted to update you personally before decisions are made about Eliza's future." Detective Larson opened a folder but didn't immediately look at its contents. Instead, he addressed Ms. Rowan directly. "First, I want to thank you for following your instincts about this child. Too often people see signs but convince themselves not to get involved." Ms. Rowan nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "What did you find?" "Exactly what Eliza's note described," he replied, his voice carefully professional. Behind a false panel in the garage workshop, We discovered evidence that confirms Raymond Williams should never have been around children. He didn't elaborate on the specifics, for which Ms. Rowan was grateful. Some details were better left unstated. Williams was taken into custody last night, Detective Larson continued. He's facing serious charges that will keep him away from Eliza and any other children for a very long time. Relief washed over Ms. Rowan, followed immediately by concern. And Mrs. Parker, Eliza's grandmother? Maggie and the detective exchanged glances. That's more complicated, Maggie admitted. She claims she had no knowledge of Williams's activities or the hidden area in the garage. She's devastated and cooperating fully with the investigation. Do you believe her? Ms. Rowan asked. Partially, Detective Larson replied. Our initial assessment is that she was manipulated by Williams, possibly intimidated. She admits he controlled their finances and made threats when she questioned him. Maggie leaned forward. But that doesn't excuse her failure to protect Eliza. This morning, after Williams was arrested, we had another conversation with Eliza at the Bennett's home. She was remarkably calm, Detective Larson added. Children often are when they finally feel safe enough to tell their truth. Maggie nodded. Eliza explained why she cut her hair that day. She told us, he said if I was ugly, he would stop. That's why I cut my hair, but he got mad. The simple statement, delivered in Eliza's voice, struck Ms. Rowan like a physical blow. The pieces clicked into place, the child's desperate attempt to make herself less appealing, to stop whatever attention was making her uncomfortable. When we asked about her grandmother's role, Maggie continued, Eliza said something revealing. Grandma was scared too. She cried in her room a lot. That's consistent with what Mrs. Parker told us during questioning, Detective Larson confirmed. She broke down and admitted he threatened me too. I thought I could control the situation. Classic victim behavior, unfortunately, but it doesn't absolve her of responsibility for Eliza's safety. Ms. Rowan processed this information, her teacher's heart breaking for both the child and the grandmother caught in such a terrible situation. What happens now? Williams will remain in custody pending trial, Detective Larson explained. Mrs. Parker has agreed to enter a residential treatment program for elderly victims of domestic violence. She'll receive counseling and support to understand how she failed to protect Eliza and what she would need to do differently in the future. And Eliza? Ms. Rowan asked, the question that mattered most. Maggie's expression softened. Judge Harmon has already ruled. Eliza will remain with the Bennetts for now, with a reassessment in 6 months regarding Mrs. Parker's potential for reunification after completing her treatment program. Relief flooded through Ms. Rowan, but it was tinged with sadness for all that Eliza had endured to reach this point of safety. There's one more thing, Maggie said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out Hello Kitty, now sporting a small pink heart-shaped patch where the seam had been repaired. Eliza asked if you could keep this safe for her until she's ready to have it back. She said, and I quote, Hello Kitty did her job. She can rest now. Ms. Rowan accepted the doll with trembling hands, understanding the profound meaning behind Eliza's words. Hello Kitty had indeed done her job. She had carried the truth to safety when Eliza couldn't speak it aloud. Of course I will, she whispered, cradling the worn doll that had witnessed so much. For as long as she needs. As Ms. Rowan left the building, Hello Kitty tucked safely in her bag, she felt the weight of the past weeks begin to lift. The system had worked, slowly but surely. A dangerous man was removed from society. A vulnerable grandmother would receive help, and most importantly, a brave little girl could finally begin to heal. All because Eliza had found the courage to tell her truth, one crayon-written note at a time. Spring arrived at Oakwood Elementary in a burst of daffodils and cherry blossoms. Ms. Rowan's first-grade classroom hummed with activity as children worked on their butterfly life cycle projects, colorful paper chrysalises hanging from the ceiling. 3 months had passed since that fateful day in the conference room. Ms. Rowan had returned to teaching, Her administrative warning expunged from her record after the full truth of the situation came to light. Principal Blackwell had even issued a formal apology, acknowledging that Ms. Rowan's actions had been not only appropriate, but necessary. Life had moved forward, as it always does, but Ms. Rowan's thoughts frequently drifted to Eliza. Maggie provided regular updates. Eliza was adjusting well to life with the Bennetts, attending therapy twice weekly, and slowly regaining the childhood joy that had been overshadowed by fear. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, as Ms. Rowan erased the whiteboard after dismissal, a knock on her classroom door made her turn. Maggie stood there, smiling. "Got a minute?" "Of course," Ms. Rowan replied, setting down the eraser. "How is she?" "See for yourself," Maggie said, stepping aside to reveal a small figure hovering in the hallway. Ms. Rowan's heart leapt as Eliza peeked around the doorframe. The transformation was remarkable. Her hair had grown into a pixie cut that framed her face beautifully. Her cheeks had filled out, and most striking of all, her eyes held a spark that had been absent before, the unmistakable light of a child who feels safe in the world. "Ms. Rowan," Eliza exclaimed, breaking into a genuine smile as she entered the classroom. "Eliza," Ms. Rowan breathed, kneeling to the child's level. "It's so wonderful to see you." Maggie explained, "We had an appointment with Judge Harmon for his quarterly review, and Eliza asked if we could stop by afterward." "The judge gave me a lollipop," Eliza announced proudly, displaying a half-eaten candy. "He said I'm doing a good job with my new life." "You certainly are," Ms. Rowan agreed, noting how Eliza stood taller, spoke more confidently. "I go to Pinecrest Academy now," Eliza continued, looking around the familiar classroom with nostalgia rather than fear. "My teacher is nice, but she doesn't have glasses like yours," Ms. Rowan laughed. "Well, not everyone can be as stylish as me." As Maggie stepped into the hallway to take a phone call, Eliza moved closer to Ms. Rowan. "Did you keep Hello Kitty safe?" she whispered. "I did," Ms. Rowan assured her. "Would you like to see?" When Eliza nodded, Ms. Rowan retrieved her tote bag from behind her desk and carefully removed the doll, now clean and fluffed after a gentle hand-washing, the pink heart patch still visible on its back. Eliza didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, she studied Hello Kitty. Thoughtfully, "She looks happy at your house." "She is," Ms. Rowan said, "but she misses you." Eliza touched the doll's ear gently. "I have a new teddy bear now. His name is Brave. Mrs. Bennett helped me pick him." "That's a perfect name," Ms. Rowan said, understanding that Eliza was telling her in her own way that she was ready to move forward without the companion that had been tied to her darkest times. "Hello Kitty can stay with you a little longer," Eliza decided. "She likes watching over your class." The wisdom in this child never ceased to amaze Ms. Rowan. At just 6 years old, Eliza intuitively understood the power of symbols and the importance of creating new associations as she healed. "How is your grandmother?" Ms. Rowan asked carefully. "She's at a special place for grandmas who need help," Eliza replied matter-of-factly. "I visit her on Saturdays. She cries a lot and says she's sorry." "And how do you feel when you see her?" Eliza considered this seriously. "Sometimes happy, sometimes sad. Dr. Lisa says that's normal." Dr. Lisa was Eliza's therapist, a specialist in childhood trauma who had been working with her since the placement with the Bennetts. "Dr. Lisa is right," Ms. Rowan agreed. "Feelings are complicated sometimes." Eliza nodded sagely. "Grandma's getting better, though. She doesn't need medicine to sleep anymore, and she's learning to be brave like me." Maggie returned, signaling it was time to leave. "Sarah's waiting in the car, Eliza. We should get going so you can make it to your dance class." "You take dance classes?" Ms. Rowan asked, delighted. Eliza twirled, showing off imaginary ballet moves. "Ballet. We're doing Sleeping Beauty for the recital. I'm a butterfly in the forest scene." As they prepared to leave, Eliza suddenly turned back and threw her arms around Ms. Rowan in a tight hug. "Thank you for hearing me," she whispered, words that held volumes of meaning. Ms. Rowan hugged her back gently, careful not to hold too tight. Always, Eliza, always. After they left, Ms. Rowan sat at her desk, Hello Kitty beside her, overcome by the beautiful complexity of healing. The road ahead for Eliza would not always be smooth. Trauma leaves marks that time can fade but never completely erase. But she had what every child deserves: safety, support, and adults who listened when she spoke, even when her words were hidden in crayon notes inside a stuffed doll. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, casting rainbow prisms from the crystal butterfly hanging on the sill, a gift from the Bennetts, sent with a note. From our butterfly who's finding her wings. Ms. Rowan smiled through tears, knowing that somewhere across town, a brave little girl was dancing as a butterfly, free from the cocoon of fear that had once enclosed her. 6 months had passed since Ms. Rowan's classroom visit with Eliza. Winter had come and gone, and spring blossoms had given way to the warm embrace of early summer. The school year was drawing to a close, with just 1 week remaining before summer vacation. Ms. Rowan sat in the auditorium of Pinecrest Academy, program clutched in her hands, scanning the names until she found it. Eliza Parker, The Butterfly's Journey, original poem. Her heart swelled with pride as she settled into her seat, Hello Kitty tucked discreetly in her purse. A special guest for this important day. The Children's Arts Showcase was an annual tradition at Pinecrest, where students from each grade presented creative projects they had worked on throughout the year. Ms. Rowan had, received a handwritten invitation 2 weeks earlier, the careful lettering showing how much Eliza's handwriting had improved. As the lights dimmed, Ms. Rowan spotted the Bennetts a few rows ahead, sitting beside an older woman she recognized as Martha Parker, Eliza's grandmother. After 6 months of intensive therapy and support groups, Martha had progressed enough in her recovery program to earn supervised visitation rights. From what Maggie had shared, she was working diligently to rebuild her relationship with Eliza on healthier terms. Several performances preceded Eliza's, musical numbers, short plays, art presentations. Then finally the announcer called her name. The little girl who walked confidently onto the stage barely resembled the frightened child who had arrived at Oakwood Elementary with a shaved head and hollow eyes. Eliza's hair had grown into a stylish pixie cut, decorated with a sparkly butterfly clip. She wore a simple blue dress with small embroidered butterflies along the hem, evidence of Mrs. Bennett's sewing skills. Most remarkable, though, was her presence. Eliza stood tall, shoulders back, eyes bright as she faced the audience without a trace of the fear that had once defined her. "My name is Eliza Parker," she began clearly, her voice carrying throughout the auditorium. "This year I learned about butterflies in science class. They start as caterpillars, wrap themselves in cocoons, and emerge transformed. It reminded me of my own journey, so I wrote this poem." She took a deep breath and began, "The Butterfly's Journey. Once I was small and afraid of the light, hiding in shadows, staying out of sight. My world was tiny, my wings tucked away, too scared to fly, too scared to play. Some cocoons are made of silk threads so fine, but mine was built of fear, a different kind. Inside that darkness I waited so long, wondering if I'd ever be brave and strong. But someone noticed my quiet cocoon, someone who cared and didn't leave too soon. They showed me kindness when I was afraid, and slowly, the darkness began to fade. Breaking free isn't easy. It takes time and care. Sometimes it hurts and it isn't fair. But piece by piece the shell falls away, letting in sunshine little by little each day. Now my wings are growing, still new and soft, but ready to carry me up aloft. I'm learning to fly with colors so bright, no longer hiding, I'm reaching for light. A butterfly's journey isn't straight or fast, but the hardest parts are finally past. And though I'm still growing, this much is true. I'm braver and stronger because of you." As Eliza finished, a moment of silence hung in the air before the audience erupted in applause. Ms. Rowan brushed tears from her cheeks, overwhelmed by the wisdom and resilience captured in those simple verses. After the showcase, Families gathered in the school cafeteria for refreshments. Ms. Rowan waited patiently until Eliza spotted her and came rushing over. "You came!" Eliza exclaimed, throwing her arms around Ms. Rowan's waist. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," Ms. Rowan replied, returning the hug. "Your poem was beautiful, Eliza. Absolutely beautiful." "Dr. Lisa helped me with some of the words," Eliza admitted. "But the feelings were all mine." They walked together to a quiet corner, where Ms. Rowan carefully withdrew Hello Kitty from her purse. "Someone else wanted to see your performance, too." Eliza's eyes widened. "Hello Kitty." She accepted the doll with a smile, but it was different now. Not the desperate clutching of before, but the warm greeting of an old friend. "I think she's ready to come home with you now," Ms. Rowan said softly. "If you're ready." Eliza considered this thoughtfully, running her fingers over the small heart-shaped patch on the doll's back. "Yes," she decided. "I think we're both ready now." Across the cafeteria, Mrs. Bennet waved, indicating it was time to join the rest of their group. Eliza started to walk away, but turned back. "Ms. Rowan, remember how I used to tell Hello Kitty that school was the safest place?" "I remember," Ms. Rowan nodded. "Now everywhere feels safe," Eliza said simply. Then, spotting a new student hovering uncertainly by the refreshment table, she added, "I should go say hello. She looks lonely." Ms. Rowan watched as Eliza approached the shy newcomer, Hello Kitty tucked comfortably under one arm. She observed as Eliza gently introduced herself, then leaned in to whisper something to the nervous child. Though she couldn't hear the words, Ms. Rowan could imagine them perfectly. "It's okay now. School is safe." The cycle was complete. The little girl who had once needed protection had become a protector herself, extending the same kindness that had saved her. Like the butterfly in her poem, Eliza had emerged from her cocoon transformed, not just surviving, but soaring. As the summer sun streamed through the windows, casting golden light across the cafeteria, Ms. Rowan said a silent thank you to Hello Kitty, the silent guardian who had carried a child's truth when words were too frightening to speak aloud. Some heroes wore capes, others carried badges, but sometimes the bravest hero of all was a worn stuffed doll with a heart-shaped patch and the little girl who trusted it with her secrets.